So actually, thank you. So I'm going to report actions taken in closed session. So our closed session item was the conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. In closed session, the board discussed the 7 proposals for the Education Service Center, ESC, located at 255 West Family Avenue, which is this building. The board selected the proposal from MW Investment Group for the ESC because the underlying terms of the offer, such as the price, close and escrow timing, and deposit, were in the district's best interest. The roll call is as follows. The motion was made by Trustee Rodriguez, seconded by Trustee Peterson. The ayes were Trustee Rodriguez, Trustee Peterson, Trustee Danberg, Trustee Forsythe. The noes were Trustee Feathers. There were no abstentions and no absences or abstains. Okay. Moving on, before we get to our public comments, I have a quick statement from myself and the board. I would like to take a moment on the behalf of the Ventura Unified School Board to acknowledge a heartfelt loss that affected our community, our school community. Our Portola Elementary School community is grieving the loss of 2 former students, sisters Regina and Romina Sanchez, who tragically passed away this past weekend following a car accident. Regina was a 4th grade student. Romina was a 1st grade student during the time of Portola, before they moved to another area earlier this year. Those who knew Regina remembered her shining light with her bright future ahead of her. She embraced challenges, showed kindness to those around her, and brought positivity and spirit to both the classroom and the cross-country field. Romina is remembered for her quiet sweetness, her caring nature, and her kindness she showed to classmates and friends each day. Their loss is deeply felt by our classmates, staff, and all those who are privileged to know. Tonight, we'd like to extend our deepest condolences to the Sanchez family and their loved ones and the entire Portola community during this incredibly difficult time. We ask that you keep them in your thoughts as we navigate this unimaginable loss. And I do want to take a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the what's happening in East County, the Sandy fire. We do have some of our staff affected by the fire, and I just want to send our heartfelt condolences to those individuals that are affected by it, to the families who are navigating such a difficult time, finding a place to live, what they're going to do next. It's being a Thomas fire vacuum we had no full well is a very stressful time. So our condolences to those who are affected by the Sandy fire. Okay, moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comment. Again, for special, it would just be an agenda item, so people could put in public comment for those items.
Okay, so we can still have public comment for those items. Thank you. Okay, we had an agenda switch or moves. We are going to move to 13B before we go to 12A1. So if we can turn to 13B1. Yes.
Good evening, board. We have Ryan Hughes, our bond director, along with Maria Veridian and Derek Reynolds, who's back there somewhere. To give you an update on what's going on at Citrus Glen, moves 4 and 5, flooding reviews.
Good evening, board. Hope everyone's doing well.
And Ryan, just before we jump into this, they're gonna jump straight into the technical piece.
Yep.
The raw issue is it's connected to potential action. Is the board to get a sense of, first of all, what's happened? We gave you some previous information. What it would take for repair, And the if and when is a conversation with the board. But broadly, at the end of all of these conversations, what we need from the board is some determination based on the investment that we would potentially want in this site right now or later. And then those are some of the details that we'll build up. So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Castro. So to give you all some quick background on the current condition of Citrus Glen, there was flooding in the crawl space beneath classrooms 4 and 5. We believe flooding was due to several factors, including a storm drain system failure and existing waterproofing failure around the perimeter of the building. Unfortunately, the flooding caused damage to the wood floor joists, flooring, and carpet. We don't know the full extent of the damage as of now, but further damage will be evaluated once abatement is complete. The storm drain system has been evaluated and cleared by Salinas. They cambered everything to ensure that there's proper flow. As of now, what we can observe is normal operation is expected and is to be further confirmed with on-site contractors. What we did notice there are some civil issues with the overall topography of how the whole campus is, tilted, if you will, to make sure that we get proper water flow. That's like the number one rule when you're looking at buildings. How do we get the water? So in this instance, there was a failure and all the water went into this flooring system, unfortunately. So right now, current condition, classrooms have been removed from service. Students and staff have been moved to other on-site rooms. All rooms have been tested for air quality concerns by an environmental specialist. All tests have been received back as clean. The environmental specialist did confirm surface mold on the affected floor, wood joists, and metal floor beams. Samples have been tested and confirmed as positive for typical mold. We also did observe fungus on the wood floor joists, and samples were taken and confirmed as positive for a type of poria fungus. Currently, rooms 4 and 5 are unoccupied and sealed. Our facilities department did change the locks, so there couldn't be any staff that can walk into those rooms. For next steps, rooms 4 and 5, the environmental company has provided a work report on containment and abatement for the scope of work. We did schedule a job walk last Thursday with abatement contractors to get proposals based off of the work report provided by the environmental specialist. We also gave them other details on work hours, as well as time frame and anything necessary to get this job done without impacting the site. So once abatement is complete, we will need to assess the amount of flooring removed and contract with qualified contractors to build back the flooring system per the original plans and details. As of now, all work will be done during off hours, again, to mitigate impacts to school operation. So the big thing in between those two bullet points is once we get to a point where abatement is done and we can observe further structural damage, we have a structural engineer on tap to come observe and give his opinion and details on how to build back this building to make sure that we're fully structurally sound. As of now, programs scheduled to be moved to Citrus Glen for the 26-27 school year will be relocated to Mound and J. Sarah or other sites. I believe Dr. Baines and Neil have been working on that in the background. So considerations to consider are the overall timeline of the project, school closure, budget, and program. So we're in the beginning stages of this, and we just wanted to present to you guys and get you guys' input.
So I guess the most immediate need is to take care of the abatement, which we have a following resolution coming after this as an action item to get the board's approval to immediately abate and remove the fold from this, whatever's going on down there. Once that's complete, you're expected to do that over summer?
Currently, we have abatement scheduled for tomorrow based off
If approved.
if approved.
And so we can start as soon as tomorrow.
Yes,
That estimated cost is
$300,000.
$350,000. That'll just take care of,
Oh, the abatement cost only?
yeah.
Right now, it's not to exceed $60,000.
So
No, 60,000. I meant the full build back. Yeah.
So 300,000 includes what?
The full build back to get the classroom functioning as it's normal.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So, where to begin?
Yeah.
Let me start with, the classes that were in room 4 and 5 are being housed currently on the Citrus Glen campus.
Correct.
Okay. And then, how long is it anticipated it would take to get the abatement done and get going in order to get those classrooms back going?
A full build back, it's dependent on the structural analysis. It's the unknown that we don't know right now. Once upon review with the structural engineer, if he finds that it's minimal or nothing, we anticipate having the classrooms back before the start of school. If the shear wall or other portions of structural components are needing of repair, it could take up to several months, dependent on the severe. We just don't know that yet until we open up the floor.
And then will that be something that would be covered by insurance? How does that work if we're deciding? No. So yeah, she can now.
No, unfortunately, there's no insurance for this loss. There's at least 4 potential exclusions for coverage for this. The main one being this has been going on for a long time. We didn't know about it for a long time, but it has been going on for a long time. So the main damage to the flooring system is rot because of the water has, been in that crawl space for a long time. But we did submit it to insurance, hoping, fingers crossed, that we would have some coverage, but we've received an official denial letter. So no, this is no.
So you said this has been going on for a while. Sorry. I saw you figuring out there. So mold is a big issue, right? So has there mold been there? Do we know exactly how long mold has been underneath that arcade essentially?
Exactly how long? No. But like Brian mentioned, we did have those 2 rooms and every classroom and hallway and restrooms in wing 1, the air quality tested. So I'm not an environmental expert, but I've been doing this for quite a while. So when we met the environmental consultant out there, mold generally becomes a problem when it becomes airborne. Then it becomes a respiratory problem for certain people who are sensitive to it. Knock on wood, good news with this loss is the water and the subfloor and the carpet basically contained everything under the classroom in that space. So it couldn't escape up into the rooms. Then after we had all the water pumped, like I said, we've tested all the rooms and the air quality was normal in all of them.
And there wasn't any child with respiratory issues or anything like that, or that we know of?
I've been reached out to by certain parents, not in this wing at Citrus Glen, in a different wing, which does not have crawl space. So what Ryan didn't mention was we have 6 total wings plus cafeteria at Citrus. Only 3 of the wings are half concrete slab, half raised foundation. The other 3 wings are all concrete. The 2 parents who reached out to me are on a concrete slab. So this is not a potential issue in that wing at all.
I do have a question for Neil, but I'm gonna turn it over.
My question was, so right now, if we did the abatement and took care of all the mold, does the school still have enough room to function without these 3 classrooms? Yes, yes.
As of now, yeah.
So we've been in we've been in contact, of course, and been talking to the principal. Currently, we moved the classrooms 4 and 5 to classrooms 12 and 13. So originally there was a plan to even move additional programs to the site. Now there's a different plan that Greg may be able to comment on, that to move programs out. So because the school is not at 100% capacity,
Yeah.
We have room there now. That's like objective analysis of that. However, I'm not sure programmatically how that works with the number of rooms that are needed for certain programs, but not the number of people, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So that would be Greg would be able to comment on that.
Yeah, so the answer to the original question is yes, given the current status and the projected enrollment with for next year. However, in the recent months, up until this sort of surprise issue, we had planned to move some 3 SDC classrooms to that site. And that's something that will not be possible without the addition of portables or without this being corrected. So we would have to shift to a plan B to send those SDC special education program classrooms to other sites.
And my second question is, if we had to switch that program to a different site, would that be more or less than 300,000?
I would say less.
Less, you have
It'd be less,
this.
it'd be less.
You have available space in the classrooms at other sites that.
Okay.
There would still be some cost for some retrofitting of some classrooms for the specific program needs, but it would not be in the order of.
You wouldn't be so much. Okay, that's all I have.
Seeing as the school there is built in pods or wings, does this floor space go under other classrooms?
No, no. We can't figure out why the design group had half the wings and half the buildings on slab on grade and the other half on raised foundations. It honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's isolated just to these classrooms 4 or 5, 1 and 2, and 2 other classrooms. Again,
1 and 2 are on the other
oh,
side.
1 and 2 are on slab on.
The other 2 wings, the other 2 wings, it's the same way. Like half of the wing is crawl space and half is concrete. So half the classrooms in each wing in 1, 2, and 3 are on one side, which is concrete, and the other on the other side, which is slab on grade. I mean, on crawl space.
From what we can assume, they're modular classrooms. Maybe there was extra modular classrooms laying around at the time. I don't know. And they just installed them then. It's a weird design, to say the least. But the whole point of the crawl space is for airflow and it attracted a lot of water.
So given that Citrus Glen is one of our newest schools, do we have any remedy with the builder? Because it's only 27 years old. Right?
No, typically they only warranty workmanship for up to a couple of years. But this problem, from what we can tell, was storm drain system is what they're.
And have we checked the storm drain systems under the other?
Yes,
wings
the
as
whole
well?
campus
And so all of those are now
operation.
functioning fine. My question for you is, given that we're predicting a super El Nino this year with considerable rainfall, what would be the plan to address that at this site? And also, kind of generally speaking, with we've had some roof issues, some drainage issues. So those would be things I'd be worried about.
For Citrus Glen specifically, we're looking at getting a better survey and topography of the site itself to make sure that the drain inlets are at the right elevation to capture the water, as well as looking at other concrete that looks like it's been lifted by roots and whatnot, getting that corrected as well. We wanted to focus on the classrooms first to get that addressed and situated, and then work on the civil side at a separate time. So we're making those plans now. Just we want to make sure the direction we're moving is approved by the board. For other sites, I'll invite Marina on her comment.
For other sites, for example, in the last board meeting, we got repairs approved for base for adult education, 5280 and 5200 building. This was slated for roof replacement, but it's now deferred. So for all the deferred roof replacements, we're doing our plan for repairs. And sometimes it becomes quite expensive to do it. However, it's worth it. And on the facilities maintenance side, the first thing I did was a lot of rain when I started in December. So there were a lot of leaks, of course, in different schools. So I have a database of those and we have repaired as they came in. However, we've just moved into a preventive mode for the future rains. So we already know where the problems are. And we have repaired those and now we're repairing the adult vegetation, which was leaking ones.
Yeah.
And then, my question for Dr. Davis is, if we move those SDC classrooms to another site, is there increased transportation costs or other sort of, ancillary costs that we would be incurring?
That would be difficult to predict without analyzing all of the specific IEPs and transportation. I would say it would be marginal, if at all.
Yeah, I guess my bigger question is, we're not talking about moving something from like the east side of town all the way to the, to that avenue or something. Because then you might have, right, significant costs.
No, there are arguably significant geographical shifts. I don't think anything as significant as what you just described, but I think for some,
Yeah, I think I can just provide some clarity, but our intention was being vague because we don't want to say to the board, oh, this is the case one way or the other, but our plan B is that one of those 3 classrooms will just stay where it is, so there's no impact. The other one would potentially be to move it to an additional space at Citrus Glen, so then whatever we would have incurred would be incurred anyway. And then the last one is the one that we will need to know, like based on these other 2 programs, where where that would reside. But right now, the plan would not be for that program to reside on the west side.
We did look into the cost of moving portables over there, to rehabilitate our portables that we currently have, send them off site to get them refurbished, bring them back. 2 of those portables, the estimated cost was about $550,000. And then leasing was really similar. That's how.
Which is why that was an internal staff discussion. That's why we're not bringing that forward.
Yes.
The better temporary solution as we go through the potential school closure process is we can address the special education needs as we would any other year. And then the bigger question and issue will be ultimately, yes, we intend to do the abatement, but does the board want us to move forward with repair prior to knowing the finality of the school closure process? So that's also new.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. One of the few silver linings of declining enrollment is that we do have space in many of our schools, right? So,
and Neil, if I could ask you, what exactly is that? Those 2 programs, SSC can be 2 different things, right? So is it the extensive needs students, and do they have, or is it an AUT program? What are these programs that you're doing?
Yeah, so those are our autism programs that would typically be housed at Mound and at Poinsettia, but to balance space needs and to kind of offset the growing TK programs using space at some of those sites as well. We were looking for other options so we can continue to support the students that in these particular programs where we don't see the numbers decreasing.
Will the students be staying with their class, or we're going to have to possibly break them up if we decide to move those programs sites?
So the 2 classes that would be the new classes would be coming straight from the preschool. So they haven't formed yet. So that's a benefit of it as well. And a lot of the students are located all over our boundaries. So having it at one school or another wouldn't necessarily create any additional needs.
And if we decide to repair, we would bring back those programs back to Citrus Glen.
Well, I'll jump in there. The intention would be yes. However, I'm going to go back to Brian's earlier statement, which is the time. So Brian, if you can come up, because I think that's relevant for this question.
Yeah, normally it's hard to commit on a timeline without knowing the full damage of the water rot that we're seeing. We'll know more by the end of the week, but up until now, we're waiting for the fungus to come back from the facility on testing. So it's hard to commit. There's a lot of moving parts, and we didn't want to commit in moving these students over without a timeline that you're comfortable.
And that would be my concern, that obviously those students have medical needs, right? Or sensitivities. So if you bring it back into a virtual, cleaned area, there could hypothetically still be mold.
I think, one, we wouldn't have the testing, so I wouldn't, our worry isn't so much that. But if that were a worry, one of the things is some students would end up in that room anyway, because we would end up needing to relocate the ESN program to the other program, to the other rooms that we've been using as the ancillary classrooms. So at some point with the configuration, there would end up being some students in there, which is why we would make sure that regardless of whether it's an ESN program or a general education with other student needs in there, we want to make sure that it's it's able to be utilized. It's also the staff. Right. We have to make sure that from the staff perspective, that those environments are safe.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Do you have any public comments?
We do not have any public comment at this time on any.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So, okay, we'll go to either deliberation or, oh no, this is we'll go to the next one. Next one. Okay, moving on to action item A1. Full A1, sorry. Consideration of resolution 26-14.
So this resolution is very similar to the resolution I brought forward last summer for Portola emergency repairs. It's basically authorizing that I can work with contractors direct without typical bidding opportunities to shorten the length of time to make these repairs. So we would seek proposals from contractors that have been pre-qualified through the district, and we know who could perform the work and get the job done as soon as possible.
And Ryan, the scopes of work on here, so in the whereas section, it identifies that the not to exceed amount, which came up in the previous conversation of 350,000.
Yeah,
But that amount includes repairs.
that includes repairs.
So if the board were to accept the abatement work that needs to be done, but not necessarily repair, well, I think the number that was utilized earlier was not to exceed $60,000.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
proposal.
that was gonna be my question about this one is if we want to just do the abatement first, and then we would discuss if we want to spend $300,000 without the recommendation from school board. So
Sure.
we have to separate those two, right?
Yes, and that's the structure of today's conversation was we just wanted to make sure that if the board felt that the repair was urgent, the timing of that is also urgent for staff. And we needed to structure this that you could make take an action that would allow us to move forward urgently with those repairs. However, if that isn't your decision, we would still need to move forward with the abatements, and that would be a different amount. So Anthony, assuming that they wanted to move forward with the abatement only, could they make a motion to adjust the not to exceed amount to something like $80,000 for abatement only?
Yes, it's possible. However, the X factor is whether or not the $8,000 would be enough for the abatement.
Yeah, so the proposal we received was for $57,000. That's with the scope of work, including removing the whole entire flooring system and joists, as well as removing the upper 2 feet of the drywall on the interior side. What we find from there is the unknown. So it'd be hard to commit to what the dollar amount would be without giving you some extravagant number.
Okay, so the best way to proceed, and Anthony, check me on this, for the board is to approve up to the $350,000, but make it clear that does not include the repairs. That would be just up to the cost of the abatements. Is that the cleanest way to do that?
Well, but if abatement would go up to $300,000 and we say that we want to wait, then it might be cheaper to demo the whole thing. Like, so I wouldn't feel comfortable with saying having a $300,000 check because the whole reason we're not repairing it, well, for my 20%, the whole reason I don't want to vote to repair it is because we don't have a recommendation from school closure yet. So my concern is spending the $300,000 in a time of budget crunch. So giving a check for $300,000, like I would vote for it.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's why we're talking about it. But Ryan, so let's rewind a little bit. In terms of the abatements amounts, since it didn't come up in the previous presentation, what is the board's pro and con to if they don't move forward with the abatements?
It's strongly recommended by several environmental specialists that we abate now. Get the problem out now. We can move forward with just the scope of work that has been identified and come back with what we found and how we move forward from there. That's a possibility that we get the mold and fungus out.
So then let me ask you this then. Thank you for that response. Given that the contractors are ready to move forward with abatements tomorrow, what is the scope of work that would need to be approved for us to be able to move forward that would then position us to potentially bring something back?
Sure. Yeah. So that scope of work includes removal of the carpet, the subfloor, which is a plywood, as well as the floor joists, and up to 2 feet of drywall around the perimeter of both classrooms 4 and 5. That way we can observe what further damage is, and we can stop the scope of work there.
But I thought I heard you say you got an estimate for $57,000.
Yes.
So if we approve, if we approve an abatement not to exceed of 80,000, that leaves you some cushion in case they find a little bit of something. But if they find, I'm just making this up, termites everywhere, right? And the whole building is getting ready to fall down, you would come back to us and we would have a second.
Of course, yeah.
That's
You
exactly
could more
why
help
I
it
think even at 15%, if we say the scope of work is 57, even at 15% increase would be 63. So 70 to 80, I'm totally fine with 80,000.
Yeah.
So on the,
I just have another question for you. Even if we were to demo the building and just say we don't want it anymore, we're still gonna have to do the abatement,
You
correct?
still have to do the abatement. Yes. Yeah. You have to have class or certified abatement contractor perform that work.
And if, let's say we do 300,000, what funding sources would that come from? What's the funding sources for
The doctor versus
It's not,
really fund? We can't use bonds. Right, anything.
I mean, normally not.
That's, yeah.
I do.
so,
I just have one more for Ryan or the team. Once the abatement is done, I think that we need to do periodic testing to make sure that we got it all. You know, we need to come back and look at it to make sure that we aren't putting staff or students in harm's way.
We can certainly do that. However, I just wanted to point out, anytime you do abatement on mold, the standard protocol is for post remediation testing. So when it's all done, we'll do testing at that point.
Any other questions?
yeah, I'll move, approval of the resolution with the amendment of the, not to exceed value, to $80,000.
Second,
Thank you, but as follows, trustee Peterson,
yes.
trustee Hanover,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Fredericks,
yes.
and trustee Forsythe.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to your team. Thank you. Alrighty, moving on to 12A2, certification of signatures, fiscal year 26-27.
Yeah, good evening, board. So this is just a requirement from our county office of education prior to the start of the new year, just to sort of have signatures. I know you guys see this again in December, but that's not, this requirement's from our fiscal side of the house and the other requirements.
If no one has questions on purpose.
Second,
Thank you, but as follows, trustee Peterson,
yes.
trustee Hanover,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Fredericks,
Yes.
and trustee Forsythe.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you. Moving on to contracts exceeding 25,000. Is the board any questions on this one item?
If there are no questions, I'll move approval.
Second,
Thank you for the follows. Trustee Peterson,
Yes.
trustee Janiver,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Fredericks,
Yes.
and trustee Forsythe.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Conference item A1, math pathways, middle school acceleration.
Yeah, thank you, President Forsythe. This is an item at the request of the board that Deja and I are happy to bring before you. It's an update of our accelerated math honors pathway that the board authorized a few years back. So we're about 2 years in. And so we have administrative regulations on acceleration, and with respect to how it traditionally worked in middle school, the number one request that we got for acceleration in middle school subject specific acceleration was format. And so we had a standing procedure for that, where students would test out and demonstrate their proficiency through a test. But we had a lot of demand for acceleration, and honestly, it's fairly industry standard as well. So that's why we came to you with that proposal to have an actual pathway rather than just administrative regulations on testing out and skipping. We still have these regulations; they still apply, but nonetheless, we have now a math honors pathway, which will sort of get to the end of the story here, which has been very successful. So we're very pleased, but we want to at least share with you where we think we're at with it. So I can hover a little bit more and answer questions on these administrative regulations if you like. But the typical process was that there's an SST upon request of a parent or a recommendation from a teacher, and then the team would gather to see if acceleration was appropriate. And for skipping an entire grade level of a given course that is very sequential like math, there was typically a test, and if students achieved a certain mark on that test, they would be given permission to accelerate, skip that, and move on into the next grade level, a grade level beyond where their current grade level was. So just sort of circling back to why we have the acceleration pathway is that even though 4 years are strongly recommended, it's a minimum for college acceptance. And as I mentioned before, it has become fairly industry standard where students have accelerated options in our neighboring districts, and in fact have very structured accelerated options that get them into that last bullet, 5 to 6 years of math coursework prior to applying, which is highly advantageous and even necessary for competitive applications to a lot of STEM majors post-secondary. This is a little small, and I won't go into great detail, but now currently with our accelerated math pathway, we have a really, I think, exciting and diverse set of math pathways. So you can see the easiest place to go is to the second to last column, that 12th grade column. Where do our math pathways take our students? And we have math pathways that take students all the way to our sort of capstone AP calculus course without being enrolled in math acceleration, and also with being enrolled in math acceleration. If you look at options 4, 5, and 6 there, you can see that students can add that 5th year and even 6th year of math prior to graduating with dual enrollment classes, etc. So really important to make sure that the public knows, all of our parents, etc., that math acceleration is not the only vehicle to get to upper level math, to our capstone math class. It's still accessible, but it's a means of getting beyond that AP Calc BC level. So before I turn it over to Deidre, any questions in general about how we got here to our second year of math acceleration and the status of our administrative regulations, or anything else I can offer by way of background? Okay. Deidre.
As you're turning it over, go ahead. Yeah. Just note that in that 12th grade column in option 6E stands for dual enrollment.
There's just a few more descriptors here in that next slide about that chart that was on the previous page. Nothing really new here to explain. But just, I know we're not being streamed right now, but just a recap, we did launch this pilot and at only 2 schools, Cabrillo and Data, back in 24-25. As a reminder, 6th grade content is actually all of sixth grade and half of seventh. Seventh grade content is the rest of seventh grade and all of eighth grade. And that prepares students for their eighth grade year to be in Math 1 honors. And just as a side note, some of us who've been in Ventura Unified a while know that we did have an algebra option. My daughter was in it. That's how I know. So we did have that around 2014-ish. But students are identified. They were identified for this pilot by several markers. CASP is one of the primary, as well as their elementary math scores. And by all data currently, we deem them successful. And because they were successful, we did move forward with the Anacapa and Balboa cohort. So now all 4 comprehensive middle schools have an acceleration program. Anacapa and Balboa are just a year behind the other 2 schools. And we did pull current grades for our acceleration students. And as you can see in 24-25, the first cohort of students, primarily A's and B's. There were some C's and D's students who were part of the progress monitoring during that year. And then this year, students, again, mostly A's and B's. Students and C's and D's are progress monitored. And we were informed that a few students did return to the traditional standard math pathway because they weren't being successful. And we didn't want them to get too far behind. But as you can see there, noted in green, students were not failing at any point.
So just a point of clarification then, if they're not on the acceleration, then they're in just like the general ed because there's no longer an honors.
That's the traditional standard path.
Yeah, that's correct. And I really appreciate the chance to emphasize that. The accelerated math pathway is our honors pathway now. So prior, there was no distinction between scope and sequence on paper and for our course descriptions between grade level math and honors math prior to the switch. So now there is a substantive, quantifiable difference between accelerated math honors and grade level math honors. We can talk about parents that we can describe and quantify, whereas before we couldn't exactly explain what was different about the course.
So then my concern, and I believe we addressed this last time, it still remains a concern, is when we have students who enter our middle school. So for example, if we have a student who enters our middle school in 7th grade, and if 7th grade is half of 7th grade and all of 8th grade, then if they have not taken acceleration in 6th grade at their other district or their other school, then they will not be in a position to do the acceleration. They will be put into the general ed.
You know, we don't have too many examples of that, but I'm speculating here, Dave, you might have more specific examples. What we would typically do there is we would potentially assess the student or that student. Remember that our administrative regulations for acceleration still apply, where we have the ability to have an SST meeting, and we can even have the student be assessed for advancement. So we don't have a system that is prohibitive whereby you have to be. And that's even true for all of our current students that might start in grade level 6th grade math and then make a decision or be recommended to accelerate, that they can then hop into the acceleration. Now it's a little less common, but our administrative regulations still allow for that testing into accelerate. So the same process would apply to a student coming from outside.
And I can confirm that we've had those situations. It's not a lot, but we've had those situations.
I hope that answers your question.
And in that case, that Sharon just mentioned, wouldn't the parent waiver option still always exist? Like if a student joins us in 7th grade and the parent was like, "Oh, my other school didn't have this, but my kid loves math, and I think they'd be great at it," they would still have the option of kind of waiving them in, even if it might be based on an SST, not like the recommended option.
I think the answer is yes. It's typically a waiver would apply to like a student at the start of a pathway that where the data doesn't necessarily tell us that student has a high likelihood of success. Hopping in mid pathway, I think the waivers would still apply, but there would be a conversation about the standards that would have been missed, et cetera. So our goal here is, of course, to try to say yes whenever possible, because we want students to be challenged. We want students to be able to reinvent themselves. That's the business that we're in. And if they start in a pathway that is ultimately not a good fit or who they want to be academically, we try to find ways to get.
So on Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm in the middle school group. Like, I'm the middle school mom. I'm in that group. The conversations are already happening about the accelerated math and how you get in it and who can be in, because there's a lot of parents who think they should be in it. And they want to know, is it their decision or is it the school's decision? Because people are confused about the waiver part. What Sabrina brought up is like, so if I want my child to be in accelerated math, can I just put them in accelerated math? Or do they have to take a test? Because this is what the question was. Some parents feel that if their child is instructed, they'll get it. But testing them to see if they already can do it, they might not, but they're saying they're strong at being instructed. So that's the debate that's going on right now, is just because they didn't test, if you test them, they might not know it right now, but if you show them, they can always do it. So like how, especially it's coming to me, right? Because especially after this comes out, like how do I answer that question about the waiver versus being tested?
So first, there is, and this is really important, there is no single entrance test. There's no gatekeeping test that we.
There used to be, but there isn't.
Okay. Yeah. So there's no single test. We identify students. The district so there's multiple pathways in. The district identifies students based on their prior academic performance. And we're looking at multiple points of data. So grades, CAF scores, etc. So there's no additional test if we're not sure, where we tell the student, okay, take this entrance test. No test. So there's the students that we identify in order to make sure that it's not purely based on parent self-selection. That's important, but that can't be the only reason through which a student gets it. There's also course requests. So parents can request it. The only time a waiver would come into play is if a parent requests it or a student requests it. And when we look at their prior academic history, it doesn't look like the student is, again, set up to have a high likelihood of success. So that's when we would tell the parent, based on the academic profile, we want you to be aware that this is a really fast-paced accelerated math pathway. It doesn't appear that your student is the right fit, but nonetheless, you can sign this waiver and take part in class. Any additional information?
No, and I can go to the slide perhaps that has some of the, you just mentioned the readiness, some of the readiness indicators. But these are some of the conversations we have with our counselors, our administrators, and parents. And the placement, while we initially look at this CAS scores, NAB, IXL now is now a diagnostic point. We look at the COGAT scores, and teacher input is also still part of the process. So
again, this is for our identification, which is not the entire story of how a student gets into class. So I think for you, Trustee Pearson, for board, for all, really important things are there is no entrance test. It is we identify students, the district identifies students, and parents can request the course, and parents can waive into the course if they're advised that it doesn't appear that might be the right fit for the student.
So I'm definitely going to need a statement because I already know that I already know this is coming to me specifically. Yeah. So I just want to be able to read or say something that makes sense to my lay person.
Yes. So, I mean, one of the things, because this is new for our district, right? And I'm super proud of the work we're doing here. I mean, I think the work Ed Services and our teachers have done here is amazing because it was gate kept for a very long time, right? And what we have done with this is to say almost anyone, right? Really, like, that is a pretty broad tent. Almost anyone can try, right? If you want to put yourself or your kid in that environment to reach for it, they can try, right? And it might not be the right place, right? And then even with supports, they might not be successful. And you can see here we have kids with C's and D's, but the conversation I was having with Dr. Castro when we were first talking about this item is what I would really love to see is the kids who we did not initially identify to be in this course. How are they comparing on their CAS scores to other kids who looked like them and weren't placed, honors now?
I can at least say that was a point of discussion, Deidre, that we had, not about CASP scores, but is there in this distribution of grades fundamental difference between the students that we didn't identify versus the students that we did identify? And the answer was no. We didn't see a massive bimodal distribution of here are the kids that we identified that are performing at the top portion of the grade distribution, and the other kids are not. It was virtually indistinct.
And I think, I'm sorry, but it was like my soapbox moment, but like, we go to conferences every year, and like one of the things I love to see is like how are districts doing, on improving their math scores, and the data shows over and over and over again, if you put kids in hard places, many of them will rise to that challenge. And I think that's what we're seeing here, right? Like what I think we have to figure out is how to have the conversation with the kids and their parents who are clearly after a semester not a good fit, right? Where they really were probably doing them some harm by leaving them there to struggle, right? So what does it look like to encourage them back into a better placement for them? But I think this is really great work.
I would agree. It's great work. Deborah, you said something about some students opting back in. Do we know how many of those are the parent waiver requests to get in, or how many are the kids that we placed there thinking they would be successful?
I'm not sure I understood the first part of your question.
Kids who left.
The kids who left?
Kids who left,
Mhm.
which,
Which group were they in? Were they the
Yeah.
waiver?
were they waived in, or
Or-
were they
Yeah,
ones we placed?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm sorry, but we could find out because it's a very small number.
Yeah, I think it'd be really helpful. Like once we have,
Mhm.
I know we're like midway, but this summer, once we have some of the data from this first year to see that. And also, kind of some of the anecdotal, like, did some of those kids maybe struggle more with like homework? Were there more challenges with behaviors, right? Like, all of those things are part of the whole picture. And it would be good to know, what other supports do we need so that the majority of kids that are in there can be successful. Right, because that's a lot.
And we have some preliminary feedback from the students as well on some of those things that you just mentioned.
And the reason why I'm asking so many questions is this is a conversation like it actually happened like right now, real world. So do you think, this is the other question I had, is it detrimental to try and go back for the student? Like that's something that people are asking is like, I want to push my child to the next level, but is it detrimental to them if I try to push them and we got to put them back? Or is it better to push? Like those are the real world.
As I say, it's often individual. It's often an individual.
I'll wait for the official statement. Go ahead.
Having been a principal and having been in conversations like these, it is different for each individual student. What that feels like having to go back to a traditional path versus struggling and staying in the struggle and getting a C when you may have been able to get a B or an A.
I have strong feelings about this, so I'll weigh in before it becomes official. We absolutely always want students to try. again, I said it before, that's the business that we're in. I'm really passionate about that. Education should be transformative, not just performative, like kids are just doing what they can do, having been who they are and walking in the room that way. We're supposed to transform. Rigorous courses with high expectations transform students. So we want as many students in the room as possible. I believe that completely. In absolute academic terms, there's no consequence to having tried and then moving back. There's nothing that there's going to be a massive gap in their math learning and it's going to show up later and it's going to hinder them in some way. In absolute terms, no impact. However, you mentioned the word feelings and psychology learning, all those things, and that really is individual. I'm sorry to speak at the formal.
Yeah, no, you're right here. I'm going to go back to what David said. The individual conversations with each family and each student about what they're trying to accomplish in this case are the most important thing, because it's not just it is what are they trying to accomplish. Like for some families, when I was a principal, especially in middle school, some of the families actually were trying to opt out, not because the kids weren't capable, but because getting a B to them was unacceptable. And that needed to be a conversation that you had with the family. Like, so what is it that you want for your child? Is the straight A's the most important thing to you and your child? Then maybe, even though your student should be in this class and they should be being pushed, if what you're really wanting is a guaranteed A, then that's a conversation that you need to be having as a family. What are you wanting out of this opportunity? Because in my opinion, and I'm going to extend this to like our English learners and our students with disabilities too, going back to what Greg just said, it is optimal for us to say a D or a C for your student that has a history of struggling with these content, that struggles for learning. To me, that's an A or B. So the fact that we're pushing them and placing them in an environment that prepares them for A to G, and I'll just say A to G, I don't want to say like the UC, like they're prepared to think, they're prepared to have choices post-secondary. We want that for them. The question ends up being, is that what the family wants? And how will they respond? Either if it's an A student who breezed through elementary school, but now for the first time in their academic career meets a challenge. And that is a big thing for some of our kids, because for them in elementary, they're breezing through. And then they finally hit a concept that they struggle with. And now all of a sudden their world is kind of in shambles. So that's a conversation. But the broader thing that I think you hear us saying is we want to support families to stay up here, but we also need to honor that for individual students and their individual psychology, and also what the family's trying to accomplish. This may be too much. And then I'm going to say on the other side, I was fortunate to work with the team in the middle school that had a complete shift of our philosophy, and we became a really strategic academic school. And then what happened 3 years later was, and I didn't even realize, I don't think I've shared this with you. One time at the end of our back to school night, one of the families came up to me and said, and they pulled me aside and said, I don't know if this school is the right school for my child, because my child is just a regular kid. And we were starting to push that. There was this feeling, because we were so proud of the things that we'd accomplished as a school in terms of a turnaround, then we had to kind of slow down and say, whoa, now we need to do the opposite and make sure we're saying that this rigorous pathway is for everyone. It's not just for the kids that are rah. Like, we want everyone to be successful. So thank you for tolerating my soliloquy. I love this conversation.
Well, I think that's a really good. So how do we then ensure that, well, or I guess communicate? Because one of the concerns I've heard from some of the teachers is that there are kids who are there because their parents really wanted them to be in an accelerated pathway, but where maybe they don't have either the sort of personal habits to do the homework and stay on top of it and be organized and all that sort of stuff to stay on task, or who may have some gaps in their learning that either came before or are part of this faster pace, and where they're going to struggle because they don't have mastery of everything they're going to need by the time they get to high school.
I would just say that struggle is okay. Even in AP and honors coursework, we do not expect all students to walk in the door being able to achieve an A. So I'm just thinking of what can you say to those parents in those conversations? The answer for me is simple. If you're not sure and you want to be that kind of student, you want to have those kinds of learning experiences, do it. So I wouldn't for the teachers who we need to be honest and say that some teachers might have a belief that in an honors course or in an AP course, everyone should not that we shouldn't see certain kinds of struggle because that struggle represents a misplaced level. I don't think that's true. There absolutely is productive struggle in AP and honors courses, and we would expect to see a range. Now, look, this is not a traditional bell curve range of grades that we're seeing. It's obviously skewed high, but I would never tell those C students you don't belong here. Not at all. To your point, I would much rather see students just productively struggle so long as everything else is acceptable, mental health, all those things, to be students positively struggling with C's in these classes than going on autopilot and getting it.
So is that dependent on the teacher? Now, there's a lot of differentiation that's happening. Is that going to be applied here?
We should still see differentiation. We should still see tier one interventions. And again, I think that's the key. My earlier point. Forgive me if I'm not articulating it correctly. We should still see a range of performance in AP and honors coursework. That doesn't. We might not see a range all the way down, and we don't see grade distribution all the way down in the F and D range, but we should see differentiation. We should see intervention. We should see small groups and one-on-one instruction helping students get back. That's good teaching, period, end of sentence. Independent of honors, AP, or grade.
We just don't want to see kids. Oh, you're not making it fast enough, not learning fast enough. Without the differentiation of those supports in the classroom, I guess that's the concern is you're going to wash out.
Yeah, and that's where the art of counseling and
Progress, our progress monitoring recommendations are on one of these slides.
Before we transition, there's another thing that I wanted to say while we're talking about that. Part of the conversations here in the US, we've had these Uber-based conversations, and I just want to say them publicly. We also, this structure is really important because it allows us to address another phenomenon that we have all experienced in public schools, which is you were either this kind of student or you were that kind of student. You were either an honor student or you were not an honor student. You were either an AP student or you were not an AP student. As if those concepts are, the term bifurcation was used earlier. And practices that we as public educators have developed over time to develop a mindset of who gets in and who doesn't. And what this structure allows us to do is to really get the best of both worlds. It allows us to say there's a place in the pathway if you want it, and if you're willing to put in the work, and if you're willing to wrestle with productive struggle, it's yours. And if for whatever reason you try, and if it wasn't the right time right now, you can go back to the typical course of study, and there's no harm, no foul. This is what I think it allows us to do, is to engage in this broader conversation with who we are, right? It's not just that teacher, it's who we are as an educational system, of trying not to define who students are or are not, especially like right now we're talking about middle school. Like we have to have a belief system that who a kid is not defined by who they were coming in sixth grade. Like that, if somebody did that to me, I wouldn't know where I would be. Probably not here. But it's so important. So that's one of the other things that I think that this structure allows us to do, is to engage in a thoughtful, meaningful way about like how we have that conversation.
And my last comment is not a question about this. It's actually a statement to the board, because we don't really get to talk about stuff like this all the time. But when I joined the board, this is what I thought I'd be doing. And my goal and hope is that when we do our social media and streamline our meetings, that we're more talking about this than like the business part. Cause I think this is the stuff that impacts children the most. Like this changes people's lives. And I just want to kind of switch up our meetings because it's like we talk about so many things that have to do with like the business side and not the educational side. So when we do have our structural meeting, like I want this to be the main goal, or get the other stuff done first so we can get to this, because this is one of the most enjoyable meetings that I've had just talking about this, because like you can see everybody's involved, and this is going to affect people for the rest of their lives. It could change how parents think about their kids. So that's all, because we don't never get to, all five of us never get to talk unless we're in a meeting. So that's why I just want to bring. I'm done.
Yeah, less mold remediation. Why not fix that? But actually, I wanted to see Deidre or Dr. Bayless. One of the comments or questions that Calvin is going to get from the mom carpool is putting all those kids in the accelerated pathway is slowing us down, or is not allowing that pathway to be what it could be for some kids. So how do you answer that?
With math, we have a very prescribed scope and sequence. And I want this good opportunity to thank, obviously, David, but also Shelley, our math docent that has worked extensively over the last 2 years with these teachers. So we have to stay on a pretty prescribed scope and sequence in order to prepare students for Math 1 in the 8th grade year so that they're ultimately successful with the remaining sequence. So there is a little bit of a cutthroat pace to the course. I always believe that there is time in all courses with block scheduling, with regular scheduling, middle school, high school, in order to weave in times for review, for reteaching, etc. But I'll say that the course is not going to change. The experience of those high performing students that this might come very natural to will not change and should not change, because the scope and sequence takes them to the exact same place, where they are prepared to take Math 1 as 8th graders and move on in an accelerated fashion through high school. So if everyone in the room was in that top row, A's, they were all just math students on autopilot. No need for any reteaching review. I've not met a lot of those students. It's always the case with math. You would get no further, because again, the scope and sequence is prescribed, and you would end up prepared to take Math 1 in 8th grade. So I would tell those parents, don't worry.
And then lastly, so if you're the parent of the kid who has a D or F at the end of the first semester, do we have any stronger levers just to more encourage you to, like, maybe this isn't a good fit?
So I think what you're asking, Sabrina, our counselors and our teacher and our parents should be in contact well before they're failing or close to failing, correct? So they're meeting, they're on the phone, they're emailing, and by progress report 1, we have a picture of how they're doing. And that's in September. So hopefully those conversations, are starting that early with our students and our families. By quarter 1, if they're not improving, they should be in that conference. And so that's where that first serious conversation should be happening. And looking at, where they are, and what will it take to get them where they need to be, or do you need to have a different conversation and say, is it better for you based on everything that's going on? Because it's not just math our students are in, right? Middle school has a lot of other classes and a lot of other things happening at the same time as math. So again, big picture for that student, looking at the whole child, what is best for them. If that student, that teacher, that parent really believes there's a place for them to improve, then we're going to keep them there and encourage that. Or progress report 2 is another opportunity to see where they are and make a decision, and then final decision by the semester if they haven't made improvement. But at any time, if they start failing, sometimes the school has to make the decision for that student.
But I also want to be really transparent. You mentioned the word levers, that we don't have as many levers in middle school as we do in high school. So we can counsel a high school student that is looking to fail and not earn credits by the semester and then be off track for graduation. We have a more significant lever. We can pull that student out because our responsibility is to maintain that student's on track status towards graduation. Middle school is different. We don't have credits. We don't have that same kind of. So I think the question, it sounds like the question is, would we ever adjust against the parents' wishes, perhaps pull the student out? I think it's possible. We haven't had to go there yet. And again, it's not quite as clean an answer or discussion as it would be in high school, because we can very easily tell a parent, your student is now off track for graduation. We have to pull them out and we have to move them because that's our primary responsibility.
I would add that there is the C grade that is required for A through G. So a student who doesn't get, even if they're in 9th grade math one, typically if they're D, they're encouraged to retake it because that it doesn't count for A through G. So that C is really important for the A through G trajectory in the future of that pathway. So that is one, as far as credits, no in middle school, but the grade does not.
So I no longer need a statement. I already know what my statement is. Trying is better than this. That's all I'm saying tomorrow. So, if you want to try it, try it. Then always go ahead. Yeah, sounds good. I move for adjournment.
And Dr. Bayless mentioned Shelley Harder, who did a great job pulling all of this grade data for us, but as well as getting the survey data out to the students, staff, and families. So we're excited to see some of this preliminary feedback from our parents' overall experience. Blue and red is good on this pie chart. So students, they're either loving it or they like it, and it's a good challenge. There are, as you can see, there are some yellow and green, and there's definitely some stress involved for some of our students. Let's see. Pacing. How is the pacing going? 5 is too fast. 1 is too slow. There's a little bit more traditional of a curve there.
I just wanted to add, I reached out to a friend and her daughter's in the acceleration program. They're, she was one that the parent requested the waiver, and I wanted to see what is your personal experience? Has it been, too challenging? What have the supports been like? And she said, we're one of those families where yes, it's hard, but it's like good hard. You know what I mean? And I just love that, because I was for many years also the gate instructor at the elementary level. And so many of those kiddos are used to getting things really easily, and they don't develop that grit and the stamina and the ability to really struggle with a problem. And it's really refreshing to see those kiddos working those muscles, and getting that grit and stamina. Because any adult will tell you that's a life skill.
So as far as the placement, this went right to the teachers. The question for the teachers: are most students appropriately placed in your class? 5 is fully prepared. 1 is lacking some skills, and there we are, 3 4s and 5s from our teachers. There's some teacher feedback. So they wrote in, they had an opportunity to say a lot of things. And here are some of the highlights from their feedback. It's very rigorous. Students in one class are driving the pace and more than the teacher, perhaps. And it's a great opportunity for our students to challenge themselves.
So next year will be the first year that we again offer Math 1 for our 8th graders. How is the prep for that coming?
Well, you answered this. You were more involved.
Sure. So Shelley Harder has been working with our high school Math 1 honors teachers to develop the scope and sequence. the slide here, I jumped to it. There is the question of instructional minutes in middle school being a little bit less. And so that was a factor when we were planning, not we, they were planning the scope and sequence for next year's 8th graders. And they did have to really outline the must knows versus the nice to knows. And
Right.
that's,
I do want to offer on that subject, and that's something that we always run into when we try to do high school courses in middle schools, the different instructional units. It's still an accelerated course in the middle school. So it's not like you do accelerated math in 6th and 7th grade, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we relax and we just do sort of normal pacing math honors or math honors. It's still accelerated because of the difference in instruction.
And since we're talking about math, I'll jump in here too, because one of the things people look at that conversation about deciding what are the essentials as like, oh, something's going away. We have several educators up here. That conversation is one of the most important conversations that you have because it's a conscious decision as opposed to having the entire course and the entire book and not necessarily having calibrated how much time we're spending on a particular time. And so I think that this conversation is it's valuable for the course of study. I think it's equally as valuable in a math department when you have, especially when we're looking at horizontal and vertical articulation about what is important mathematically. What are the concepts that, although they are getting them in middle school, yes, that's important, but what are the concepts that we need them to be successful in high school? So I just want to say that it is valuable in terms of placements in the course of study. It is equally, if not more valuable from a pedagogical perspective about what matters in mathematics and what ultimately to our kids.
and that conversation isn't just with the math 1 honors, it's also with math 2 honors. Because the students are obviously moving forward into that.
So I think the key takeaway there is that Shelley has done a really nice job of connecting with our high school math department chairs. Particularly, I want to give thanks to the one high school department chairs who played a key role in helping us develop the math 1 honors course for middle school.
I really want to thank you for bringing this back so quickly because I do think this is just like super important and really exciting. And also want to thank our math teachers. This was a heavy lift, right? Like they're going into uncharted waters with some of this. And I know having to build the plane as they're flying it with 37 very smart and probably precocious kids. But I do think that this is super cool. Something that I think is a great service to these kids and is something that really like ultimately is going to help them build bright futures. So thanks.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for the wonderful presentation.
Sure. Like thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to Healthy Campus Children. Sorry, Healthy Campus Children and Youth.
Yeah, really pleased to have Katie and Carol and Neil Ronnie who've been instrumental in this. But just my short introduction to this is that we initiated this process to work with Healthy Campus, the vendor that supplies us with the platform by which we take part in the fee schedule from the state, and we submit claims for reimbursement. Every expense that has come as a part of this initiative has been paid for by the grant. This is a completely general fund free initiative on our part. So I know that Katie will go into maybe a little more depth about that, but that's something that's really important to remind the board and the public is that this was approved as a result of having grant funds that could only be used in this capacity to partner with a vendor to develop the ability to submit claims as part of the fee schedule. So,
sorry, I just want to clarify. You're not talking about the staff components. You're just talking about the actual contract with Healthy Campus.
yes, correct. Sorry.
What is that from a right front end?
Well,
start picking up the tab.
No, so there's going to be no cost for us to continue this. The ongoing costs are taken as a 10% right? The percentage of claims that are reimbursed that go to Healthy Campus to sustain the platform and to sustain their work as the vendor that submits the claim, works on the claims, packages them, and gets them to the insurance company. So there's no ongoing general fund commitment.
No, essentially there's like certain milestones we have to show the county that we've hit certain parts of this project, and then they'll release the funds to you.
They release the grant funds.
Yeah.
But there's no, after the grant funds are expensed, which we're close to that, there's no general fund expense commitment.
So essentially, we don't send our payment to Healthy Campus until we get the grant funds from the county after the milestones have been completed. So we hold on to that bill per se until we receive the grant funds. So they've been pretty flexible on that. They've been pretty flexible working with us, saying that, okay, we understand that these are grant funds you're receiving, and that you could hold off from paying us until you get it.
Right, but that's just the county being passed through for the grant funds from the state. So I think the question is more about once the grant funds are expensed, once we have Healthy Campus, the platform up and running, once we're building and the grant funds go away, how do we sustain this initiative? We sustain it through the reimbursements themselves, that Healthy Campus has an incentive and interest in submitting and getting reimbursed because then they take their 10%.
And just as a quick reminder, had we gone through the county consortium, we would have been, I won't say losing, but we would not have been eligible for an additional 10%. We would have had to pay an additional, allow the county to take a 10% off the top for us being a part of the consortium. So that was our incentive to go about this independently.
Okay, good evening. All right. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on the Children and Youth Behavioral Initiative, also known as you'll hear, we also call CYBHI. It's a statewide California initiative that strengthens school-based behavioral health by allowing schools to bill and receive reimbursements for students' health insurance at no cost to families for eligible wellness services that schools already provide. So that could look like counseling, individual, group, SEL lessons, things like that. The Department of Healthcare Services, DHCS, implemented CYBHI in statewide cohorts. Right now, they have 1 through 6. Ventura Unified joined during cohort 2. As of March 30th, 2026, DHCS reported that 700 local educational agencies are participating in the initiative. Out of those 700, LEAs in California, 181 have submitted claims and received reimbursements. In Ventura County, 18 LEAs and 2 colleges are participating in the initiative. And that was as of March 2nd, 2026. So we have partnered as our billing vendor with Healthy Campus. So as our third-party platform and implementation support to help implement CYBHI workflows and reimbursements. Throughout the school year, we've provided trainings for all practitioners across the district. Those practitioners range from our school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, clinicians. In addition, we have ongoing office hours alongside our Healthy Campus lead to reinforce workflows, address questions, and support consistent documentation and claim submission. And this picture that you see here is just a sample of what that looks like on the platform. Okay, moving on, what we've accomplished this school year. One thing I want to acknowledge is that we really worked hard to establish consistent workflows for consistent insurance verification, documentation, and claim submission. We really tried our best this year to train all of our practitioners. We supported the staff by providing trainings, groups, and ongoing office hours, and to really be there to answer questions on the spot. Scaled family engagement. We launched a district campaign model in November and expanded it across 8 different school sites. And then we can talk a little bit about that at the next slide. Strengthened universal supports, expanded classroom and skill building, increased proactive check-ins and groups to maintain engagement after the campaigns. And then we've also established routine monitoring to just help support the sites, the practitioners, and sustain momentum. Our early outcomes as of May 1st, 11.81% of students have complete consent and insurance information on file. What that means is that they have consent to treat and consent to bill. And then also the insurance information that the parents provided. 2,975 service sessions have been documented and submitted for reimbursement to date. And out of that, 17,400 in reimbursements we've received. As of May 12th, I've been at this, that has increased to 19,791 out of 1,211.
Before you move on,
Yes.
so all of these bullet points about workflows and providing training and the district campaign and all of these things, this takes staff.
Yes.
And so that's one of my questions for this. I know we're saying that the grant pays Healthy Campus, but like, what are we paying in man hours in order to make all of this go? Because that's not being paid by the grant. Correct.
Correct. Yeah, this is a part of the processes for our social workers, for our counselors, for our clinicians to be doing this work. So you can describe a little bit about the kinds of things that they do. So again, they're providing these services already. And yes, we have principals that are working on engagement campaigns. We have some of Katie's work has been shifted to some of those organizing those engagement campaigns. So yes, there is staff time to ramp up this.
I think should Katie please answer the question. Also think it would be good, for you to talk about how some of our other practitioners have a long established history of billable hours. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. This is a new practice for some of our practitioners. It is a very, very old and established practice for other providers. So that would be an important part of the conversation. So,
I can speak a little bit to some of the practitioners now. So for instance, in our wellness centers, our school counselors are already providing group counseling, individual counseling, check-ins. So those types of services had already been established. And so now they're just actually billing for those within the platform. In addition, we have our school-based clinicians that also have helped alongside building the momentum after the campaigns we've had. And they go in and do certain lessons in the classrooms. Our school counselors in elementary and middle school are continuing to do classroom lessons. Now we're able to bill for those. So those are the things that they're doing every day. But now we're able to bill for those things.
But aside from those services, what about school service department reaching out and getting parents engaged, getting the approvals, like all of that? Because I know our staff is already spread thin.
Yes.
And so my concern is the amount of hours that a smaller staff is being required to use some of their already, fewer hours in order to do these specific rollouts. And that's only at a few of our sites. It's not even all of our sites. So I have a concern there.
Yeah, so to Dr. Castro's point and to answer your question, it's really like we're building a culture right now. So the example of Medi-Cal billing, which is a similar process for reimbursement for services that we're already bound to provide, we had to create a culture here that this is part of your day-to-day responsibilities. And we have to provide that time to our practitioners to be able to bill for these services. So we've built in those times for all of our job alike groups. And it's a process over time. This is a brand new rollout. So we're at 11% of parents right now. We got reimbursed $17,000. When I came on here 4 years ago, we were recovering 30% of the Medi-Cal billing that we're recovering now. And they were spending approximately the same amount of time doing it. We weren't necessarily allocating specific time and prioritizing it, and reminding people in our professional development that it's part of our job and it pays for positions. But now we're doing those things, and now with the fee schedule brought on, we've continued to do that. We've continued to set time aside, and that already set aside time for updates and professional development. There are some practitioner groups that this is new to, like some of our PPS counselors. And so it's a process, but I can tell you, and Katie can tell you better than me, that they've been more than gung-ho about it and enthusiastic and think it's a positive thing. It's just a matter of working through not just with our staff, but with our community and helping them see the value in it. So I think the further we're along with the initiative, the more participation we're going to get, the more reimbursement we're going to get. Regardless, we're going to have to continue to provide all of these services, and we need to provide all of these services, so we will. It's just a matter of making sure that we follow through with the families and we set this as the culture. And Katie's has implemented great ideas, and this is all Katie, all the progress we're making. And she's really done a good job collaborating with partners that are implementing it across different school districts and seeing what's working, what's not. And, it's a learning experience for us as well. But we're going to change a few things next year, and those things aren't all set in stone, but we have some things in the works that will help us off the bat and create more of opportunities to start recovering costs and needing.
One of the I think one of the things that would be really helpful to clarify, I had to go back and I pulled up the August 6, 2024 presentation on therapeutic services, right? Because we kind of did a bunch of things. Yeah, not at the same time, like in a series of movements, right? But they were all kind of related and they're jumbled in my head. So, because we brought in the therapeutic services, and some of that is what you were just describing, like these are services we are required to provide, and have been required to provide for a long time, but we were using contractors to provide them. So we were paying someone else to do them, right? Now we brought a lot of those services in-house, which has resulted in better quality, but has also resulted in more FTEs. So when we have conversations about like position control, right? Like that's something that is, I'll just say murky in my head, right? Because we're like, oh, okay, well we cut, but we're adding. So I think it would be really helpful to have, this conversation around healthy campus, because I think it's confusing to people that somehow healthy campus was going to pay for all counseling, right? Like, and I tell people like that was never the goal, right? Like if anything we recoup is great. I know at one point we were talking like maybe $2 million, when everything is fully running and all the wheels have been set in the right direction. But we spend way more than that on counseling services, right? And we should, because counseling is really important in my opinion. But so the goal was never that Healthy Campus would completely offset that expenditure. But I think having all of those various pieces of the puzzle together in one place would be really helpful, right? Because some of what you're doing, Katie, is that therapeutic side that we are required by law to do. Some is what we choose to do as a district. And then some of that is reimbursed and some of that, right? And so having all of those things together so that when we're explaining to people, like the reason we would like for your family to participate is it offsets the investment we're making. It's never going to be free to do all of these things, but it's offsetting the cost that the district is investing in services. Does that make sense?
It does. I think Calvin is the same.
Yeah, my question is kind of a hybrid because, and this is not like a gotcha question or anything, but I think based on what Shannon's saying is, so before we did this, everybody had a job to do, right? And so let's just say you did that job in 8 hours, and now we're doing this. So, like, my question was, did we stop doing something to add this process? Or when you said culture, are you saying that, or you like being more efficient now? Like, they had 8 hours to do this job, but they really could have did it in 6, and now we just added this, and now we're working more efficient because both of them can't be the same, right? You can't be doing all you can do in your 8 hours and then add 4 more hours and still do all the same job because you only have so many hours in the day. So I was just wondering, is the culture, when you said we're changing the culture, is that what you mean by we're being more efficient with our time? Because
Yeah.
you can't
So,
do both.
Katie, you shared after the mental health committee some data around like the billing and time spent by some of the staff. Do you want to share that, like that what you've seen in the evolution of that process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when we have kind of 3 different conversations. So I'll see, bring it back. Yes, that we have different providers that can send billing. I want to separate the conversation. But the reason that I asked Neil to come up to talk about the culture is that billable piece is something that has existed, even exists within our clinicians. Many of the clinicians we hire, if not all of them, they come to us from doing this clinical work, and billing is a part of that work. It is not new to them. It's incorporated into their responsibilities. School psychologists and other practitioners, there's an understanding that submitting billable hours in clinical interns, they recognize it's a part of that. What's different is for our PPS credential personnel, this is a new practice. And this is not part of like how they come up. It's not necessarily part of the training. So that's new. And that's what Neil was addressing. Before I hand it over to Katie, because this is also something that I think is important for the board to hear. We as the staff have had this conversation, and it relates to the rollouts and how we get parents to come in. Shannon, this gets to your question about like the who and who does what. Could we, and are we exploring other models, especially like based on enrollment, that we embed this into just our general enrollment processes? Yes, we're exploring that. And that's going to help to a great extent. One of the things that is at the center of some of our the work that Katie has been leading with I'm going to say our PPS counselors, because it just makes it clear, is there at the very beginning there's a strong philosophical, I don't want to say disagreement, but a philosophical weight on some of our practitioners, I'm going to say our PPS counselors, about, is this my role? Is this my role to be placed in a position where I'm asking the parents, can I have your permission to submit billing? And that was a big part of this, like that's just shift, and not just a culture, but a shift in like, what is my role in doing this? Because they've never been in that place before. And so I just want to acknowledge that. So Katie, in your response, if you could talk about, start there, like about that philosophical rollout, because that does affect what Shannon was saying about what the workload piece, because that was a big piece of that. So if you can start there, and then if you can talk about some of the personnel that are delivering services and how that looks for you.
Sure, yes. So yes, in the beginning, we started out, like Dr. Castro said, with, just training, providing information to all the practitioners. And one of the main things that was a concern were the PPS counselors in regards to their, their new role in billing and all those things. What we found is because we had multiple meetings in regards to, as you know, Sabrina, in our mental health committee meetings, to talk about like, well, what are some of the obstacles? Is it the time? Is it asking the parents? All those things. And so as we started to grow and listen and pivot, that's where we came up with the campaigns. Because in the beginning we did a soft rollout, right? We didn't put it in our annual update or anything like that. And so what we were asking for, when we were doing back to school nights or asking the counselors to, call parents, doing all these things. It became something that they felt like they were overwhelmed. Throughout, as the year advanced, we ended up providing a lot more trainings, and then also the campaigns allowed people to have that exposure and allowed parents and the entire district to understand, like, oh, this is something that we're doing. This is just what we do. And so when that increased, their uneasiness decreased. Does that make sense? And so it went from, oh, it's going to take me, as you said, Shannon, it's going to take me 2 hours to do, it's going to take me 2 hours to do, the billing. It went from that to now saying, oh no, it doesn't take me that long. I know the program, I know, the platform. Like I said, we have our Healthy Campus lead, who is Johnny on the spot. They have his cell phone, they have his email. He'll do, Teams meetings, trainings at any given day. And so I think because we have been hands-on, it has really helped minimize the time and the pressure that they initially felt back in August.
And then the second part, unless somebody has questions or comments, the second part was in terms of the who. You ran through several different personnel that are responsible for providing billing, wellness counselors, PPS counselors, clinicians. Who are those personnel that are responsible for?
So are you talking about just all the personnel?
All the personnel that will submit billing into the system.
Sure. So some of those personnel are PPS school counselors, our PPS psychologists, our social workers, our special education clinicians, our school nurses. I mean, I don't think that is anyone. I think that's the bulk. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, wellness counselors as well. Sorry, I kind of lumped them into just school counselors. Yes, and wellness counselors.
Okay, so it's 8:04. Do you want to push on or do you take a break? 5 break, 10 break. We go.
I can work.
Okay, let's have a 10 break.
Sorry.
8:14.
It's okay.
Yeah, I usually wait.
I started email. I moved back to email. I hope I didn't answer that. No, so it's budgeting because we made it. We did. Yeah, I know. I'll have to call up here really loud.
I know, but like,
Yes.
when you start taking this, like,
Where?
did I hear there's pop-ups? Pop-ups. Oh. Like,
How did you started with them? What's the little popcorn? The little
Yeah.
kid one. I think it
yeah, well, the, it tastes like syrup gummies.
No, what is the popcorn reason?
Yeah.
What? No.
Yeah, you got popcorn, but it's the state popcorn.
A Cracker Jack. That's what I'm talking about. So
Oh.
right now, and Calvin used to write it on my Cracker Jack. And so when I saw the popcorn, I thought I would. Somebody would.
Any popcorn, no. Pop-tarts, like, come on. But here I am, I'm eating peanuts. I got out of my chair because I thought you said Pop-Tarts.
There is Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, those are right. She's trying to templates.
And she went on him.
Yeah.
Oh,
That one? That is, yeah. So this takes me back.
Are you freezing? I'm going like back and forth as the door opens and closes and like. I usually have my puppy and I'm like. No, earlier I had my shawl on and then all of a sudden I was like, oh god, I'm hot. Just go back and like. Power service. Yeah. I'll let you know. Can we see some of this revenue?
Say we just need to get
Yeah, I mean, hey, we start getting it that all day long.
So.
Yeah, just keep it up. Because that's and I just do it. Okay, so there's probably a lack of applications. And this year I don't have as many. When you're graduating, we're about time. So, thank you. Really? Super fun.
We know we
I
can.
mean, some that.
And
But I'll just have to interview them. That's all right.
this.
And I don't know, I said, like, they're on the little area, or I'll just do it.
Just go with characters, building the other stuff you need for like your real world. So it's like. We're in that. We're that's our need right now because I have no doubt. Take any class you want. But we'll have to. And Carson told her.
Everyone would be the second. That's right. For I was like, no, I can't go get all. I was gonna see the check. I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, you're off the naughty list and you're still having $82.50.
You want to just be
The left leg on the other side. They cut
That's my 17-year-old. She's like,
I was talking about the Tesla, that's where I already. Like, we got no doubt. Outside, so.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get it.
Oh.
This stuff is a lot of care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do we say? Go ahead. Totally different.
Not on there.
You make the most of everything. Someone, I wanna say, already here.
Don't use it up for 10 minutes. Yeah.
That was somebody else. Two different kids. Most successful. Yeah.
She hides them.
I'm gonna leave another kid.
People talking about their snacks.
That's good. That's a like, one and done. Yeah, but one.
I'm like, I go back So she was in. Oh, okay. That's usually me. I was even thinking about wearing like sweatpants here. No, I think they're on the same like home.
Oh, okay. We moved that.
I know we have some, but I don't. Are you? From object detective, yeah, he retired. Yeah. Yeah, ours twice. You don't know what Vegemite is? No, it is. This is what I thought. But Vegemite.
That's probably right. Yeah, the way in front of it, to make it up like is it too late?
Well,
It's no,
Yes, I
eat it every day.
You grew up
You really eat it every day?
My grandmother. My mother does, but my grandmother. Yeah.
We did for real.
So you just got the same. Oh, no, I loved it as a kid. Yeah, you got that. Wait, I'll go down.
sorry, Katie.
Yeah, some people gotta take a break and stuff. Could push on.
All right, so then this a little bit early.
Alright.
Okay, back to you.
So, back to the early outcomes.
Oh,
Microphone.
sorry. Thank you.
So back to the early outcomes, we currently have 3,643 claims pending, which would have the potential to bring in 74,423. Assuming that all those claims are outstanding. And that was as of May 12th. So I alluded to this earlier in regards to our campaign highlights. Back in November, we launched our first campaign at Ventura Elementary, and then moving forward, we went ahead and moved forward with multiple sites across the district. We were school-specific outreach, including principal messaging, school counselor messaging, support, parents-aware communication, bilingual resources, QR codes, campus visibility, hard copy forms, and on-campus engagement activities and guided balance to complete forms through the Healthy Campus Family Portal and or through paper consents. The campaign cites increased family participation in consent and insurance verification. As you can see there of the list of the 8 schools that participated. Poinsettia Elementary was our first campaign. It was like a pilot campaign and it went, and they actually did 2 weeks. Most of these are 2 weeks and then a 1 week like last push. And so Poinsettia Elementary, as you can see, went from 6.3% to 56.5%. Then from there, we kind of moved forward and see what secondary would look like. So we did Deanza, Foothill, Pierpont, Boyna, and so you can see the results from there. What we learned from there is that we didn't have any major objections to providing consent and or insurance information. The primary barrier was awareness and then receiving the paper forms. Participation improved most with trusted messengers. So it improved when we were able to have the principal sending out the message and have the school counselor send out the message as well, opposed to it coming from the district office. And then, of course, multiple ways to respond. So we did the Healthy Campus Family Portal as well as hard copies. So we had consents in English and Spanish with QR codes, as well as links. And through the principal messaging through Parent Square, they also have a link that they could use if they needed to use the QR code. Some of the services that we provide across the district, that's just an overview of some of the that we currently provide that are reimbursable. So on coping skills, emotional regulation, relationships, wellness check-ins, staff consultation, So those are our social emotional lessons. Targeted supports, short-term individual counseling, and group counseling. Those are some of the things that our social workers do. Our wellness centers as well. Schedule check-ins and referrals to identify needs and early monitor progress. Care coordination with families, and then of course our most intensive supports, crisis response or suicide risk assessments, higher frequency of counseling. Again, that kind of goes towards our social workers and or our school-based clinicians, and then one hand off referrals to community-based services such as CCH. Room to grow, next steps. So this is something that we talked about earlier. We would like to increase student access to supports, right? Expand universal supports, and strengthen pathways for students to connect to counseling groups and care coordination, more wellness center structure, more opportunity for group and individual check-in and classroom presentations, increase district-wide participation, expand our campaigns to additional sites, and sustain gains at completed sites with ongoing family outreach. Annual update integration, we talked a little bit about this. One, in order to align with county and state, with the recommendation to use an insurance verification and annual update as required as an annual step for all families, making it a part of the standard enrollment routine, which would be they'd have the opportunity to opt in and opt out, and then also provide their insurance information.
And if I can just hover on this is our last slide here. This is what we're most excited about. And this actually connects to the conversation we had earlier about the amount of staff time required for the campaigns. We really think that this is going to significantly increase the percentages of consents that we have without the required initiatives. We still may have campaigns and publicity campaigns, but again, building it in just to the culture, it's part of the annual update. It's what parents sign. And given what we learned through the campaigns, that there's not been an objection to it. I've not fielded a single call from parents about a philosophical objection. I've heard of maybe a few, but largely the barriers, as Katie said earlier, have been about just awareness. So if we can build this into the culture, and Katie, I'll get a chance to talk a little bit about the data matching too, that we think that we're going to be way above 10% next year. And I don't think that's wildly optimistic. I think that's reasonable. And so I think that the commensurate increases in reimbursements will also follow. So I think that's what we're looking forward to.
And then strengthening billing quality and value through continued training, office hours, and quality check. And of course, monitor reimbursement trends and reinvest funds to maintain and expand student mental health and wellness services. One of the things that Dr. Bayless talked about was the data match, which is what that is basically all of the, so DHCS has Medi-Cal information that they are going to be sharing with us through Healthy Campus for all the students in our district that have Medi-Cal. Will be able to get their insurance information without asking for the parents to actually write it down, submit it, and all those things. Of course, we would continue to need consent. So we would continue to need consent to treat and consent to bill. But it would take away the obstacle and the barrier of actually having the parent to provide us with all the medical information.
So, I think this is probably a question for you, Dr. Bennis, but I'm not sure. So have we revised our best case scenario now for what this looks like? Or are we still thinking that at some point this is yielding us, millions of dollars in reimbursements?
So this is just some back in the napkin math and a song and right. So we had a very soft rollout for the majority of this year. We didn't have strong billing for much of the year. So we don't have a great year to base this on, but when I look at where we're at now, okay, so we have $74,000 in billables in the works. Let's say that we get back the majority of that, because there's no guarantee that everything that we submit gets reimbursed, but that's that's the goal of Health Campus. And we had, 15,000 reimbursed. So we're going to, just for the sake of math, I know it's not accurate, but rounding up to $100,000, maybe by the end of the year. So, and that's at a 10% sort of penetration level with respect to getting consents and everything, and in a very slow rollout year. So, could we get to that $2 million mark? That might be a ways out, but I do think several $100,000 is well within our reach. I think that that's reasonable.
And then I guess my other question, which I don't need the answer today, but I do think something that I would like to see as we move forward in terms of the way we track this is how are we doing for our Medi-Cal services? Or like what percentage of that are we of what is billable are we in fact billing and recouping? And then a separate like for kind of more what the optional services, right? Like, the pushing classroom lessons, counseling for students who might have suicidal ideation, that sort of stuff. What are we recouping for those types of things, right? Because I do think they're related but separate camps of services that we're.
Is that's a good question. Is there a way for us to disaggregate that and track that in our system?
Yes.
Plus, I mean, we're paying Health and Campus. I mean, they should be able to decide
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
Seems obvious.
And I do want to also just wind it back where we were at the beginning of the year with the Aries rollout. Part of why we are where we are was I had given the message to our team that Aries was our priority. That you all know just how huge of a lift that was. Just people like we I don't want to say barely made it to implementation, but we were on the cusp of people like losing their minds. Yeah, exactly. And so we were out also holding a lot of hands and thanking people for and then, I think every single member of the team was like highlighting someone who was good at something, bringing fucking like, how did you do what you did? Like that was honestly 60 or 70% of our year. So that was, it's not embedded in here, but that is a big part of where we are. And then I hope what you're hearing is looking to roll out, trusting for others, I think your comment as well. Just know we hear, like we've heard that from the staff, like adding one more thing to where people already feel maxed out. We hear that. And so I think, hoping what you all heard is that there are elements of that will be alleviated entirely next year. Plus you layer in the familiarity with Aries. So there are a lot of things that we'll be starting next year from a process perspective in a different place than we were this year. There were some big heavy lifts across the board for many personnel. Sure.
So I don't know if I have consensus for that data for to be brought back. But the other thing I would like to have is when we transition to an internal therapeutic services team, right? The intention was that would save us money because we wouldn't have contracts with other outside agencies. So it'd be great to have a comparison of what we're spending now versus what we were spending before. And I don't know how it worked before. Like when we had outside services, were we still billing for that stuff, or were they billing for it?
They were billing.
Yes, they were billing.
Okay. So anything that we're getting from billing now is gravy beyond what we were saving with outside contracts. So again, I mean, I think it would be really helpful because there are a lot of components to this transition to put some things down on paper to be able to compare like things so that when people say like, well, why are you doing this? I mean, it's not very compelling to point to $17,000. No offense to anyone that's been billing for those things, right? But like, how do we tell the story of why we're doing this, both from a numbers perspective and a quality of services perspective?
And I did see heads nodding, so there's consensus there. Thank you. Since it seems like the conversation's winding down, I just want to kind of honor the conversations that I had with Katie specifically on this issue. We could have put greater pressure on our personnel to get to a different place where we are right now, but that was a judgment call on my part. And Katie knows, like I shared, she said, well, how are you going to incentivize people? And I shared, well, let's give them an abundance of support first. Let's make sure that if there's any way, and she talked about it, like who's that person that they call if they're struggling in that moment. So that way we're not developing more resistance to something that's new. So I just want you to know that that was also very intentional, that we could have been in a place, but I also felt, given the other things that we talked about already, it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right time to put more pressure on our people to do something that was new. It was better for us to build just our collective capacity and temperament toward doing something new. So I just want to acknowledge that part is very much on me. It was just a judgment call in terms of where we were as an institution for readiness for something like this at the time. So all of that is to say, I want to thank Katie, because Katie at each phase of this has been ready for what we could do and what that approach could look like. The pivoting to the piloting was okay. All right, so then we're not going to do this. What can we do? So even though I know Katie is also not super enthusiastic about the amount of time and energy for what we have, I do think that it's a strong foundation, like Greg said, for where we go from here. And we owe you a lot for getting this, because it's been a lot to get something, an entirely new process that didn't exist before in place. So thank you for all the work.
You're welcome. And I also want to say, and I think I say this every time I'm presenting health campuses, that the amount of work that the practitioners did to even feel, what's huge, because it was an aspect that many of them weren't used to and were resistant to in the beginning, but by the end of the school year, they were on board. And so you wouldn't even been able to get to that amount if they didn't bill. So thank you to all of those practitioners.
Before we end, sorry, I just want to close the loop. We're not budgeting $2 million.
But we did, when we first started talking about this, that was the number that like ultimately we were feeling like we could get to, right? So that again, this is like where we have to make sure that we're, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when we started talking about millions of dollars.
That number came from like an exact calculation of how many services that are billable we provided in that year.
I'm just going to interject. Like, we don't need to have this conversation. Yeah, we've never built for it. We've shared many times with the board why we were uncomfortable putting that into our projections for exactly this reason. And the other part of that is a full implementation, and everything that you've heard today shows we are still at the very beginning stages of like immersion and implementation. So we're good. Thank you, Hassan, for being the latest. Yeah.
You should use that money to replace.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. And we understand this is a huge undertaking, and please thank your team for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, moving on to our consent calendar. Is there any consent items that we should pull and discuss? There's only 2, it looks like. 3, 4. If not, we can take a motion to approve.
I'll move it for the consent calendar.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Trustee Peterson,
Yes.
trustee Vandenberg,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Douglas,
Yes.
and trustee Forsythe.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you. Okay, our last item is adjournment.
I'll move for adjournment.
Thank you.
So,
Oh,
Board of Scott, trustee Peterson,
Yes.
trustee Vandenberg,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Douglas,
Yes.
and trustee Forsythe.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
all right, thank you all. Thank you, staff. Thank you, our long audience member. Appreciate you being here. And thank you back. Appreciate you. And Amy, so you know everything, she put things, you know. We all do, but, yeah.
Thank you. But I'm gonna give it to 11.